from the age I could remember, although my parents hadn't sent me to kindergarten yet. During their spare time, they had already started teaching me some knowledge and methods of acquiring knowledge. First, I learned to recognize characters, starting with the simplest Chinese characters, learning to read and write them one by one. Then came Chinese pinyin by the time I started elementary school. I had already learned these letter combinations, which were somewhat dull for children, that simply represent sounds. Next, I read children's books with annotated pronunciation. My parents would often read them to me first, and then I would read them aloud initially, with few characters I knew. I couldn't read smoothly later, as long as the sentences were made up of common characters. I could read them fluently. Finally, through pinyin and radical components, I learned to use a dictionary so that I could look up unfamiliar Chinese characters when reading and learn by myself. One of my parents studied Chinese, and the other studied English, so they weren't very proficient in the sciences. Therefore, after I became quite skilled at recognizing and looking up characters, they bought me a set of 100,000 Ys, published in the 1980s. From then on, I began learning all sorts of scientific knowledge. In those days, when the internet wasn't widespread and not every household had a television, the main way to get information was through reading books and newspapers. During the time I wasn't playing like other kids, I was immersed in books. I would often get so absorbed in 100,000 Ys that even when I was in the bathroom, I would take the book with me, reading while squatting, holding that position for an hour or two until my legs went numb. And when I stood up, I could hardly walk at first. My parents didn't pay much attention, but later on, they scolded me several times for this. The things I learned from books, I sometimes mentioned to my parents with a sense of pride, discovering that they hadn't heard of many scientific principles, or that their understanding of those matters was wrong at that time. I was quite proud, but now I realize that their expertise wasn't in these fields, and they were people from that generation, the most hard-working generation, yet also a generation affected by the times. So it's not surprising, but at that time, the situation where I knew a bit more about scientific principles than my parents strengthened my enthusiasm to keep reading.